I want to get the webinar started. We're talking really good topic.
Okay.
Let's start the webinar.
I'm recording it right now, but this is like, we haven't like officially started.
We'll go ahead and start.
All right. She's so bossy sometimes. Hello, everybody. I'm Zarina Harris. I'm here with my friends of LOI Events. We have Sabrina Allen. Say hello.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we have the Revival Brothers, Joe and Sean. You guys say hello.
Hey, all.
Hey, what's going on?
So you guys might not know this, but we always have like a pre-discussion, you know, and that's so that Sabrina doesn't drop F-bombs when we're actually recording and stuff like that. And we're really discussing.
Why do I always have a that says bad words? So bad.
You gotta get all the F-bombs out before we actually start.
I didn't even say an F-bomb the whole time. We were in our pre-recording.
It's our filtering session.
It's our
pre-filter.
session, yeah, and it's a way for us to really get the creative juices flowing on what topic we think is relevant to you guys, that we've either been seeing in the industry or something that we think needs to be brought forth. So today we're kind of doing something a little different. We are going to talk about the transition from you, maybe you personally, or maybe a friend of yours, going from being a fix and flipper into a note investor. The good, the bad, the ugly. What does that look like? What do you really need to do in terms of your mindset and all the things and the bad things that go along with that? Because I think all of us here at LOI have a different perspective on this topic. Me, from having trained people for a long time, you know, who were real estate investors. The Revival Brothers are fix and flippers, you know, that is part of their business that they do. And then they became note investors, so they know from personal experience. And then Sabrina, she gets all the bad guys because she has to deal with them as clients. So we all have experience and a perspective to bring to this particular webinar, and I'm kind of excited about it. And we were like giving away a whole bunch of great ideas. So I was like, let's start the webinar. So here we go. I'm going to throw the first question out there because we're going to start from like ground zero. So why, in you guys' opinion, I don't care who goes first, why would somebody want to become, I'm a fix and flipper, why do I want to become a note investor?
Well, there's multiple answers to that. And, you know, as a fix and flipper, it depends on the area you're in, but let's just take California, for example, because we're in California. If you're in California and you're a fix and flip right now, your margins are anywhere from 5 to 10% if you're lucky. And the amount of capital that you have out is in the $300,000 to $800,000 range, which puts you at risk. So your risk reward is horrible as a fix and flipper in California. Maybe in other states it might be a little different, the model, but when you're making 5% on $600,000, I mean, the numbers might look good, but you're at risk for, you know, what happens if in 1 month you know, the sales start sliding, or, you know, the value of the home start going down, and you end up doing this fix and flip and breaking even or even losing money. There's too much risk involved, in my opinion.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, I think that the time frames people talk about are, let's see if we can fix and flip 3 in a year. If we can turn our dollar 3 times in a year, that would be fantastic. But reality says that ain't gonna happen. I mean, you're looking at 1 to 2, depending on the size of it and how much work that you have to put into it and the regulations in the jurisdictions that you're in. So then, you know, you ask the question, why a note versus a fix and flip? Well, on the note side of it, it's a lot less risky. It's a lot less money to invest, depending on the area you're in again. But you're also dealing with more stability. If you're dealing with performing notes, you're investing in a payment stream essentially at a certain percentage rate. If you're purchasing an REO, you have an option to create seller financing on that and create a, you know, so if you bought if you bought, let's say you bought an REO that needed to be fix and flipped, and you fix and flipped it rather than selling it, you did seller financing, you actually create more income for yourself than just selling it at market.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, on the note side, when we first started, we asked the question, how can we purchase a note that's vacant, you know, where somebody's walked away from the property, it definitely needs help and it needs a fix and flip on it, and then turn around and sell that at market. That was our model when we first started, but
Okay.
do it where we actually made more return than a regular fix and flip. So we were looking at time frames, the time value of money. We were looking at 8-month turnaround, 8 to 12 months on one asset, and we were looking at minimum of 30% return. So we went from a 10 to 15% return to a 30% return in a 1-year time frame. Now, you know, that's not to say you can't do a fix and flip in 6 months, but that's also not to say that you can't do that with a note either. I mean, it's happened before where you're at the verge of going into foreclosure,
Right.
and you actually, you know, you go through that process, and 4 months later, you're through foreclosure and you're starting your fix and flip, and then month 8, you're unloading the property. That can happen as well. But the whole point is that you're increasing your returns, and you're mitigating your risk. And I think that's, from our standpoint, what attracted us to notes.
Okay. Sabrina, did you want to add anything to why, you know, as a flipper, why would I want to become a note investor? Or you want to get on the next topic?
You know, as a flipper, you know, I mean, I do some fix and flips, and sometimes right now I'm taking a break. I'm sick of the contractors. I'm sick of, you know, running in behind people to do what they're supposed to do. I'm sick of excuses. It just, I have more control and I have more visibility with my notes than I do, you know, with my fix and flips. And even though I don't, you know, I don't work for the servicer where my notes are, but I'm able to go onto a dashboard. I'm able to see the, you know, the conversation log. I'm able to see what's transpired, and it's timestamped, it's recorded. For me right now, when I have to balance the stress of how to manage my money, right now, the market's soft. I'm expecting, you know, values to go down anytime, and I don't want to have a lot of cash out there in hard real estate. And if I bought notes at a discount, that's more, there's a way for me to still be able to recover and be okay. Because if I can turn it into a performing loan, or even do seller financing and have an income stream off of that, versus having, you know, $80,000-$90,000 tied up in one asset, with some, you know, with some knucklehead contractors that that I'm gonna have to, you know, maybe show up with a baseball bat to get my stuff.
Ooh, she gonna get the godmother of notes out on her.
I mean, you know, it does. That's why right now, when I have to look at where am I going to deploy my capital, where am I going to put my money, right now it has to be more into notes, and it does have to be in the fix and flips because of that.
Okay. No, that's perfect. So that kind of leads me into, okay, now I'm convinced I want to become a note investor. This is where I want to kind of insert almost a warning, because there's two things that we talked about in our pre-session that I want to bring up. Number one was pricing of notes right now. And number two was what the gurus are saying in these seminar classes at these REIA clubs and stuff like
You
that.
mean those lies they telling? you mean those bold-faced lies that they're telling?
So
It's motivational speeches. They're just motivating them. They're making them feel sorry for themselves.
Let me
you know.
start you off on the wrong foot, okay? Because I'm a flipper. I don't know that it's a lie, right? Let's be honest here. I don't know anything about the note business. I'm a flipper. I don't know that what these people are saying is a lie. The latest lie, and I can pull up text messages. I won't, but I can pull up text messages right now where a friend of mine sat in. This is probably 3-4 weeks ago. Sat in a class where the person in the front was saying, "Yeah, you can become a note investor." And then out of his mouth, he said, "You can buy notes at 20 cents on the dollar."
Where?
Exactly. Timbuktu. Because that, That, ladies and gentlemen, no, but see what that does for me as the flipper. I don't know that that's not true. Who do I have to compare that to? Right? And I'm like, oh my God, that's a serious discount. This stuff looks good because they're not being accurate where the pricing is right now. And so I'm this fix and flipper. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can get these notes for 20 cents. So what it does is it sets me up for failure because I'm already coming into the business with the wrong mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And thoughts on that? Pricing and gurus.
So I just think that it's really, unfair to the new people trying to come in if they're being given those false promises.
Yep.
Because basically, what you're creating is a world of one and done. Whether it's one note or one deal, it's one and done because they haven't been given factual information about how they're going to scale their business. So my recommendation to anybody that's new coming into the business, do some due diligence. And I will even say, even as a fix and flipper, when I would go do a walkthrough with the mindset of a fix and flipper, of all the things that I had to do to turn this structure into somebody's dream home or someplace somebody wanted to be, I would always still mark up 25% of what my final cost was to prepare a cushion. And people who've been fixing and flipping for a while, they prepare for the unseen. So if they have that same mindset of actually, what can I see going wrong? What can I see behind this wall of this, what somebody's painting a picture for me? That is the way that as a new fix and flipper, especially if you're experienced, that's the way I would say to have a mindset of whatever you're being told, and make sure you put that cushion in there, that mark, because that's something that we should do, because you always prepare for the unforeseen.
Right.
And that's really all I have to offer on that. But that is one of the ways that the level-headed fixer and flipper always prepares for the worst.
I think with any investment, you have to be very conservative in your approach. I know we do. We always look at it from the standpoint, if we invest in this, the worst case scenario is X, and if X happens, we break even. We won't enter the investment if that's not the case.
No, that also speaks to education too, which is actually not on my bullet points here, but that speaks to, as a fix and flipper, you've been doing it 10, 15, 20 years or whatever. You know that there are unknowns, right? You know that there might be mold behind here. You kind of have that mindset because either A, somebody's told you, or B, you just have that experience. But when you're coming into the note space, if someone's not telling you that, there are unknowns even in notes, even though it's paper, and you're coming in thinking, I'm just going to get these deals and I'm going to turn them over or whatever. When you start to, and that speaks to what Sabrina just said about one and done. You get that first snafu, that first oops, that first I wasn't expecting this, and it costs you. That could be your last note.
Well, we from experience, our first note, we ended up doing the full flip on it. We rehabbed it, but we went into this thinking that, okay, 6 months, we're going to be in and out. We'll grab the property in that 2 months, then we'll rehab it. It ended up taking 2 years to get all the way to the finish line. Actually, probably a little bit more. It was our first note, but going into it, we had one expectation. But during that time period, we definitely learned a lot when it came to the velocity of money. Yeah, we're thinking we're going to be turning and turning, but you got to understand that going into the business to prepare for the worst. And the fact that we prepared for the worst, that we didn't even lose money, we still made money on the deal.
Okay.
Do we hit our benchmark? No, but we still made money.
Okay. That gets to the next point, mindset. The note business is much, 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 much slower than real estate, especially if you're fix and flip. And I've seen people come in and I'm going to tag Sabrina on this because she works with these people a lot. And this goes exactly to what you're saying, Sean. When you're coming in and you're a fix and flipper, you know, okay, this is going to take X amount of time. When you're new to the note business, you don't know how long these timelines are. And compared to flipping, they are a lot longer. And so you have almost this impatience sometimes with flippers and real estate investors coming into notes. And I know Sabrina has personal experience with dealing with some of these folks.
I have one right now that I'm dealing with. And so we took it all the way through foreclosure sale. The investor is a fix and flipper. He paid about $15,000 for the note. I'd say cost was probably another $4,500. And he had a buyer at $55,000 last month. And because the guy wasn't returning the contract in a timely manner, he canceled the contract. We found another buyer maybe a week or two later, and they still haven't closed. So every week he's like, when do you expect to close? Well, I'm at you're at the mercy of the title company. You're at the mercy of the buyer, and they ask for a month to close. And I thought that was ridiculous. So I crossed the timeout and I gave them until the 15th of September.
Okay.
But he's very, very antsy, very, very like, and it's not even that he needs the money. It's just like, he just wants it to be done. I was like, look, we didn't do the clean out. There's a lot of things that we didn't do, right away. So you have to really kind of take this in stride and baby steps. This is, again, I tell people all the time, this is not a sprint. This is a jog. This is a trot. Put my grandmother on her walker. That's kind of how you have to think about this in the mindset. That wasn't nice, I know. In the mindset of moving forward, you have to just have a little humor in this, because if not, you'll go crazy.
You have to have humor dealing with you, or else you will go crazy.
So it does. It gets very, very frustrating. I have another investor who's just like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Or where are we? And they don't even understand the foreclosure timeline.
Yeah.
And then the hiccups when mediation comes. That's another setback that people don't anticipate. And my fix and flippers are the worst when I'm like, they requested mediation. Sometimes I'm afraid to make that phone call. Not literally afraid. Not that I'm afraid of them. The words that are going to come out of their mouths when I say, oh, this is shifted to mediation because the borrower wants to do this. Or how about a house that's empty and one mediation is still required in that state? They're like, well, why? The house is empty. It's law. It's a requirement. I can't get past that. Right. And so with that being said, I think that people need to just open their minds just a little bit more. And we need to do better about preparing fix and flippers when they transition in to setting expectations on what's going to happen. You might make more money, but it's going to take longer for you to do that. You make more money, but you're more secure in a note and a mortgage than you are in a piece of property. Because all of these things can happen that you don't prepare for. Right. So you just have to show the pros and the cons, fix and flipping versus fix and flipping notes.
So I want to talk about this mindset, because this is really, really, really important. And I've seen it over and over and over again with real estate investors and flippers coming into this space. And I'm going to use an example. I'm not going to use their name, but I know a couple friends of mine, and they were wholesalers. They got a hold of the note business really early. This is back in like 2012. Got a hold of the note business. This is back when pricing was way down. They were buying stuff at 25, 30 cents sometimes. And they got a property, and they thought that it was occupied because the grass was cut, and on the outside there was a lot of what's called emotional equity. The flower beds were fine. It was manicured yard. And so they said, oh, there might be people who live here. So they got it, found out it was actually vacant. What happened was and this is odd. This will probably never happen to you. but they got the note, and they started, doing due diligence. Found out that the family that lived there moved out, but they had pride of ownership, and I guess they didn't want the neighbors to know or whatever that they were being foreclosed. So they would go back every other week and cut the grass. So that's why it looked like somebody still lived there, because they were kind of like keeping up appearances, so to speak. So what they did was, they ended up being about $11,000 into the deal, and they decided, okay, since there's this pride of ownership over here, let's go ahead and get the deed in lieu from this couple, and they were able to, so they didn't have to really go into foreclosure or anything, and like incur that expense. So they just bought the note, paid a little bit of taxes, got the deed in lieu. What they did was, again, this mindset. They're wholesalers. They said, okay, let's just sell this to a local wholesaler out of our area. And that's what they did. They sold it to this guy for 20,000 bucks. The guy buys it for 20,000 bucks. He puts about $6,000 into it between fixing the roof and paint, and he was able to sell the property for $60,000. So they look back, and I hear from time to time, because I talk to them pretty regularly, they hear from time to time how, they'll kind of bemoan how stupid they were in not slowing down and taking the time to either rehab it and do the little bit of rehab that it needed and then flipping it, or how much more money they're missing out on. Really, what they focus on now, if you hear this story from these people, they talk about, man, we should have seller financed that, and we would have had a really good note that we could either leverage later and have a partial on, or we would have some consistent cash flow. Because one of the reasons they also, and Sabrina talked about this, they got also into the space, was they were getting burnt out. They had some rentals, but the rentals weren't the majority of their bread and butter. It was wholesaling, but they were getting burnt out on that because they were just doing so much of it. So they thought, notes would be a good way. At the time, notes would be a good way to get really cheap properties and keep wholesaling. And then as they became more sophisticated note investors, they figured, man, we could have been creating notes this whole time instead of thinking of this as a way to get cheap property. And, they kind of, you live with regrets and stuff like that. So that speaks to the mindset that you have when you're a rehabber or fix and flipper or whatever, transitioning into the note business and realizing that that same mindset that you carry in real estate doesn't translate well over here, because you're losing out on a lot of money.
Mhm.
Comments?
Oh, I agree 100%. I think that's, I mean, look, hindsight is always 2020. If we can go back into time and redo things, we would definitely do them different. But I think the important thing is you learn from those experiences, and then people watch these types of webinars and learn from our experiences. If we had access to this kind of information when we started out, it would be a whole different ballgame, because we listen to people's experiences and we take them to heart, and we try not to repeat those same mistakes. And I think that if you are a fix and flipper and you're trying to get into notes, the best thing that you can do is understand how notes work, understand how a non-performing note works, understand how the mortgage process works, understand how the loans work, understand. I mean, you don't really have to be an expert, but you have to understand the concepts and the fundamentals of the note in order to make informed decisions. And I think that's what's important.
So I'm going to transition a little bit. We don't normally do this, but it got brought up in our pre-session. I want to kind of bring it back in. Sean actually said, well, let's play devil's advocate here. Let's have a counter argument about the velocity of money. I'm a fix and flipper. I know I can make this money over very quickly, and you're telling me the note business is slow. So you want to kind of unpack that a little bit, Sean, and then we can attack you like we're going to.
Well, yeah. So basically, when you're fix and flipping, it depends on your strategy. You're probably trying to do at least 4 a year. So you're doing it quarterly if you can. And so the velocity of your money is moving pretty fast, right?
Mhm.
So what I'm hearing is that when you get into notes, that the amount of time that it will take to gain possession of the property, which is no guarantee. I guess it has to do with how you purchase the note, but it could take much longer. So at the end of the day, does it net the same amount that your return? So why is notes more favorable than just, you know, moving forward with a fix and flip? So, I mean, that was just something I wanted to bring up, just as a counter argument to go
Just to
over.
get on our nerves.
Yeah,
That's why
let's talk about why though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why? Why a note versus if you're, let's just say that you're able to do 4 a year, which I don't know anybody who's really doing 4 a year unless they've got like their own construction
Well,
crew.
let's not get stuck at
They've
4
got
or
a
3 a year, whatever.
jurisdiction in their back pocket. But anyway, you know, more realistically, it's going to be 2, sometimes 1 to 2 a year.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let's just say they did do 4, and let's just say that, you know, your returns were the same. Let's look at the risk associated with it, the mitigated risk with a note versus an REO, and how much money you have on the line, how much capital you have out versus how much capital you have coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about the velocity of money. You know, it's not just about returns, it's about, you know, what's at risk. If you're taking loans out at a certain percentage and, you know, you're up against time, you know, you're going to get hit pretty hard. But if you're, let's just say you're working with investors and you're using other people's money, what kind of returns are you giving to those people on a fix and flip if your fix and flips are only earning 5 to 10%? You know, I think more realistically, you're looking at financing from private entities that might finance it out at, you know, 6 to 8% if you're lucky, and then you're looking at hopefully making that 10 to 15% spread. But from what I've seen out there, you're lucky to make 5 to 10. So I mean, when if you're just getting into the business, it's going to be very difficult for you to turn some money. Unless you're doing the 2 a year that people talk about, or 3 a year, because that first one you do is just going to be break even. The second one, you might make something. The third one, you know, if you're lucky, that's where you really make the money. But look at the percentage that you're making on those fix and flips for that 1 year. How many times can you flip that dollar in a year versus how much percentage you can make on a note in a year, right?
Right.
And so the notes, I mean, if you ask anybody here, will tell you that you got to be patient. You know, the note, having a note, depending on what you buy, a non-performing or performing note, a performing note can go 5 years, 10 years. You can have partials. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. A non-performing note, if your end game is to take the property back, you're looking at anywhere from 8 months to 16 months, and sometimes even more, depending on how many you have to do and what jurisdictions you're in. So you got to take all that into account as well. But you're also looking at purchasing them at discounts, and you're looking at higher returns. If you're looking at it from a yield standpoint or from an annual ROI standpoint, you know, you can earn anywhere from, I would say conservatively, 20% to 40% in that range on a non-performing note if you do it right and you find the right assets and you purchase correctly. So if you're, let's just say that you find something at 40%, okay? And let's say you had it 2 years, that's 20% a year.
Yeah.
And so the question is, are you going to make 20% a year on your fix and flips? I mean, and then when you look at both, you're also taking into account your risk. How much risk do I have out there?
Right.
You know, if the market goes up and down, where am I? You know, am I going to lose money? Am I going to make money? In notes, if the market goes down, you don't necessarily lose money.
No, not really.
So,
as long as it's still paying. So that's a good point. Where I would come in as far as a counter argument, and this goes back to what you were saying a little bit earlier about education and kind of knowing what you can and can't do in the space. There's flipping in the note industry. You flip paper. You know, more specifically, you can flip like non-performing stuff, but you can flip performing stuff as well and make that spread between the different yields. So maybe you buy at a 13, 14% yield and you sell to somebody at an 8%. Those 4 points or whatever it might be, 4 or 5 points, is your commission, so to speak. And it, depending on how big the note is, it could be as much money as you would have made on a 9-month fix and flip, right?
Absolutely.
But all you've done is just exchange paper, and it costs you emails, it costs you a little bit of your time, some, you know, few phone calls on a cell phone, but you're not out a whole bunch of money as you are on a fix and flip. And so then it becomes, okay, if it's really just about sort of this velocity, if that's all we're talking about here, because I have another counter argument for all of that. If that's all we're talking about, then you can flip paper, you know, in the note business. Sabrina, you have something to say about that?
We were talking about this earlier today, you know.
Yep.
You know, flipping a couple of loans.
Yep.
And how to do that and how it would make sense. And there are people, you know, like, well, who's buying stuff at 5%, 7% yield? People who are passive investors who
Absolutely.
who don't have to explain a lot as long as it's secured or backed by something.
Right.
That's doing that. People who have an IRA account who's not as aggressive, who has some time to spare, just wanting their money to be safe and grow, and not being the risk takers that we're willing to be. So when you question where is there a place to flip this to, it absolutely is. You have to be visible in order to be able to do that, but you can do it all day long.
And people don't realize that there's other people out there that are willing to take 6 to 8%. And here's the thing, I did an analogy today. I did a little chart, and the chart outlined the best 2019 CDs out there.
Okay.
So the best 2019 CDs were paying a top dollar of 2.63%. When you subtract inflation from that, you're at a little above 1.5%.
Yeah.
And so at 1.5% versus earning 6 to 8% yield on your money, it's a no-brainer. It's a very easy sell, and not only that, but now the investment's also secured by real estate.
Yes.
So you know, it's there are secured CDs out there, but not all of them are secured. And
You bring up a good point, and you spoke about this earlier. You know, we're as investors, just in general, whether you're a flipper, a note investor, or whatever. You know, our first thing is like, why would somebody put their money in a CD at 2%? You know, or scraping to get 2%? And this, you talk about this a lot, Joe, is easy button.
mm-hmm,
People love an easy button.
mm-hmm.
And
So
go ahead.
it's funny you say that. I have a family member who's married to a millionaire, and it's not her money; it's his money. But she takes her allowance per se, builds it up, and she puts it in the CD, and she really thinks she's doing something. And you know, we were having a conversation over her barging in on my Holiday Inn Express breakfast, and she says, "Well, you know, I got a CD, I got a little money put up." And I said, "Well, how's that money working for you at 1%?"
Ooh.
And I said, "Where is it at, Chase?" You have it to credit union. And I said, "If that works for you," I said, "Merry Christmas." I said, "But my Merry Christmas happens very often when I'm moving my paper around." I said, a 7 to 10 minute conversation. I said, "I just made $7,500. I said, "That's what my effort did."
And you know what the sad part is that the more money you have, the less people care. And I'll give you an example. We know somebody who has $30 million and he's liquid, and he has his house paid for, all of his cars, and he doesn't want to invest in anything because he's happy making 1%, because he's making $300,000 a month, and he doesn't need anything else. You know, so when you're dealing with really wealthy people, to convince them to go from their 1% to 6% is very, very difficult, because they're comfortable where they're at. It's where you're in that $1 to $10 million range, where, you know, people want to earn a little bit more. And
Interesting.
so we're finding that when we're looking for investors, the target for us would be in that $1 to $10 million range. But you have to, but to find those people, I mean, the question is where do you go? And quite honestly, you know, the more that we hang around some of these IRA companies and and we network with them, the more we realize that there's great opportunity in finding people that want to park their money, and
Right.
they'll park their money all day long at 6 to 8%. When I was young, when I first, not that I'm not young, but when I first got married,
You said it. I mean, you stepped right. I mean, you saw the doo-doo and you stepped right in it.
yeah,
Mr.
I did,
50.
didn't I?
Jeez.
Yeah, I hit the big 50 this last month.
Congratulations.
You're young.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah, but when we first got married, my wife and I didn't have any experience in investing our money. We had maybe 10 grand, and we said, well, why don't we put this 10 grand in a CD, and in five years, maybe we'll earn $2,000 to $5,000 on it. Let's see where it goes, which wasn't the case, but because our mentality at that point was maybe we'll go on a cool vacation. It wasn't about how can we take this money and maximize our investment. It was more about let's park the money somewhere and try to earn, a decent percentage on it, and use that money at the end of that term to go on a vacation or something.
Yeah.
None of that ended up happening, and we ended up making some ridiculous amount, less than 1% on the CD. It was ridiculous, but my point is that there's a lot of people out there in the same situation that are yearning to park their money in something other than what the bank pays them in a savings account or CD.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And that's another thing too. And we're going to transition to like the third point, against Sean's counter argument. When you're a fix and flipper and stuff like that, because you're in your own world, you're sort of in that box, you don't realize or maybe even understand that there are other people who don't want to make 25% or something like that. They want to keep it real easy, and 6 to 8% is like gold to them. But that's also something when you come into the note industry that you slowly begin to realize. And there's a lot of people that I'm talking to right now, and they've been in my beta group or whatever, and they're like, oh my gosh, the person really just wants 6%. So even people who are already note investors, sometimes it's hard for them to wrap their mind around that, especially with IRA folks. It's already retirement money for them, which transitions me into the third counterpoint against Sean's argument about velocity and things like that, which is when you're a fix and flipper, you don't have any way of like building wealth. You kind of make your money now and you move on. Whereas in notes, you are building long-term wealth and cash flow. And can you guys speak to why that's important instead of looking at the immediate money right now? Why building long-term is important?
Well, Security will not be there when we get old.
Social Security is not going to be there in 3 years.
Yeah.
So instant gratification sometimes is the high that people get. But they don't realize that lifespan is much longer than what it used to be. People didn't prepare to live to be a lot of people, even Sean, Joe, and I we're close to 50, if not 50. Now we're still at that point where what am I going to do at 70 years old if I don't have enough money put up? So if I'm smart on how I actually strategize and I make enough money as a fix and flipper, that money's going into my next deal. As a note investor, I can take some now, I can take a little bit now and live a little bit today, and then I can put some towards my future, towards my retirement, towards my care if I have to go into a long-term facility. I can split the money, and I need the instant gratification, but I don't need the instant gratification. Because when you do a fix and flip, there's sweat equity, there's labor intense work that's involved in doing a fix and flip. And you feel like you deserve that money when you're done with that fix and flip. And you don't always feel like that when you've done a note. it's been a little strenuous, it's been a little stressful, it's been a little up, a little down. But you just look at it differently. And I don't know if it's because of the company you're keeping in the note space that makes you think about the instant gratification is great, but I can reinvest it. I can still allow this money to grow. And when I get that money in the bank, I don't have to go looking for property. I don't have to physically go out looking for property. I don't have to walk through that property. I can sit at my computer and scroll through a tape. I don't have to go out to pick out my materials. I don't have to go look for, what color brick I'm going to put on a wall. If I'm going to put lava rock in the flower beds outside, I don't have to do any of that. And when I go into my next fix and flip, most of the money that I made, I got to dump it in my next deal.
And that's another thing is money. And so let's just take the fix and flip, for example. You do a fix and flip, you make your money. Let's say you make a 10% spread. You did okay.
Okay.
So you get your capital back. If it was your capital to begin with, I mean, most of the time it's leverage, but you get whatever capital you put in back, and you get your 10%. Now you have that money to go do another investment, and then so you invest that money into the next investment, and the same thing over and over. What if you were to, at the end of that fix and flip, do seller financing, like you were talking, Zarina, and in that seller financing, you got a down payment of 10%. So now you're making 10%, right, off of the deal.
Smart.
And you're creating a payment stream. And let's say that you wanted to cash out of that payment stream. You could season that for a year or even 6 months, for that matter.
Right.
And you can sell that note at the end of that, and you're actually increasing your profit margin by doing that.
Or better, you can sell partial.
So
get your money back that
Right.
you put into the deal.
Yeah.
Sell a payment stream.
And then
you have your 10%, and you have the payment stream, and this you just saved for your retirement. So on the back end.
Yep.
So
and that's how you create the wealth.
By waiting, you make the money back, but then you have this upside on the back end.
Now, I don't think people really understand what we're talking about. So Zarina, you're the expert in the area. Why don't you explain to them a little bit how that works?
So with seller financing, really what you're doing is you're financing the sale of a property versus waiting for somebody else to have financing and cash you out. So it's a little bit of a longer term strategy, but what you can do is, let's say, for instance, you had this house on the market, it's not selling. What naturally happens is you begin to reduce the price in order to incentivize somebody to come with a bank loan and cash you out. Seller financing actually kind of goes in the opposite direction. Usually seller financing, because you're carrying the financing, there's anywhere from 5 to 10% premium on the sales price of the house. So you're already winning there. Then you have typically a better interest rate than what conventional is doing. So you're winning there. And you're getting a down payment. So now you're actually recouping some of the money that you've put into this fix and flip, right? Now, by carrying the note, typically, let's just say, for instance, you did it for 30 years. You financed the whole thing over 360 payments. There is always, no matter what note it is, there's always sort of a break-even point with where your fix and flips would have made you money and whatever. And let's just say that's 15 years in. Just hypothetically, it's probably not that far in. You could actually take your note that you just created, and say, okay, I got my 10% down, but I still need another, let's just say you needed another 60 grand. Okay. I don't know what the sales price was. We're just throwing a number out there. You could actually sell to a passive investor or an IRA investor, or even a note investor. You're going to come up off a few more payments. You could say, I have 360 payments total on this note. I only need to sell the next 60 payments or the next 100 payments in order to recoup that $60,000 that I need to go do whatever else. So you say, hey, Mr. IRA investor, pay me $60,000 and I will sell you a partial that says for the next 60 payments or 100 payments, this borrower is going to be paying you back, and that would be your investment. What happens is, let's say you sold 100 and now you get this note back, it reverts back to you. You've already got the down payment, you've already recouped your investment, by selling that partial, but now you're entitled to another 260 payments down the road if it continues to pay out that way. And your unpaid balance really hasn't moved because the first 5 years of a note is almost all interest. So what happens is you're really leveraging yourself when it comes to carrying financing. What happens though is a lot of people don't have the patience to sit there and say, okay, I've just made this note. I have to wait 3 or 4 months before I can sell that partial, because you have to have a payment history and all this other stuff. They just want their money right now and they want it quickly. And they're not realizing you're leaving a ton of money on the table by not carrying the financing. And quite frankly, sometimes you can get a seller finance deal quicker than you can just waiting for the market and waiting for some conventional person after you've reduced the price 4 or 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we mean by changing your mindset. If it's absolutely like, I have to get this money, if you can wait a few months for that note to season, you can get the money. You really can. But you can also have that leverage on the back end. Like, you know what? I did what I needed to do. I got out of this deal. I paid my lender or whoever I leveraged the money from, but I'm entitled to another 200 payments or whatever of $500 a month or whatever. So that's what we mean by really changing your mind and becoming this note investor and realizing, you know what, I really do have to start thinking long term, and I really have to start thinking about what this deal could be, and it could be 2 or 3 times more than what I'm actually thinking on a fix and flip.
So I'm a new fix and flipper in the industry, and I'm interested in what you're talking about. I have no idea how to go about doing it. I don't know any of the resources, and I don't even know how to sell that partial. What do you suggest?
You're brand new. One of the challenges that you're going to face is you don't have a network. And so what I would do if I'm brand new, I would actually start reaching out to, you can start right here at LOI events, because we do have people who have these kind of connections. But really what you need is you need to get in touch with some kind of note investor who has passive investors who are looking for those kinds of deals. Because what happens in the note industry is there's sometimes, if you don't have the proper network, there's a lack of inventory. So it's very easy for you to just reach out and say, hey, I'm getting ready to create this note. Do you have an investor who would like to purchase either a partial or purchase this note off of me? So that's really where I would start. And then you work out the numbers from there. I've told several of my people in the beta group, listen, you don't have to have the passive investors. You just have to have access to somebody who does. And I know that you guys, Revival Brothers, are actually working with IRA investors and working with passive investors. So you guys are actually looking for inventory to sell to these people. So it's a symbiotic relationship. You don't have to know everything. You just have to have access to the right people.
Right. Yeah. Well said.
All right. So I think we've covered most of this stuff. One last thing. Sabrina, you have a very specific strategy using Craigslist that we kind of touched on a little bit. Do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit and what the heck you're doing when you're taking some of these REOs back and seller financing or whatever?
A couple of things I do is I call it handyman special. I actually was just getting so frustrated on trying to get agents to go out with stuff that looks ugly. I remember I had an agent go out to look at something, and all she could point out to me was the negatives in my property. And I'm like, she'll never sell this because she doesn't believe in what she's getting ready to sell. So how can I find a way to get my REOs, visible to people? And so I said, well, let me try Craigslist. Let me try Facebook. Let me try,
Yeah.
So I tried Facebook and I tried Craigslist, and I got more interaction on Craigslist. I found local investors who was looking for that handyman special, who was willing to pay cash. Some of them needed seller financing, And it's really, really worked. I get them to go out, take pictures. I get the true condition of the property. It's not negative. It's just, they're just telling me what needs to be done. And then they're telling me how much they think it would cost me to have it done because they're already a fix and flipper. So it gives me the idea, if it's not a loan that I own myself, but one of my investor owns, I'm like, okay, I had somebody out there that's in the space. This is what they think it's going to cost to repair it. And this is what they're willing to offer to buy it. What would you like to do? So giving two options and actually making more money, not having to pay a real estate agent 6% or 5% to sell it, and actually finding somebody that's stepping right into their dream of their next project. And that's what I've been doing. And then even for wholesalers, I'll reach out to a list of wholesalers and say, hey, I got this property. Can you move it? This is what I need for it. And if you get anything above that, I don't want to know about it, you know? Right. But at least knowing that my investors made a profit and the wholesaler's going to make money, you know, just being really, really creative. But the Craigslist thing just is awesome. I just love it to pieces because that is how I've been able to move a lot of my REO property. And people don't believe it, but I have backup to show it. The emails are really, really funny sometimes. Like, do you know that there's 9 dog cages in this house? Well, no, I didn't, but now I do. It just gives you a true picture of what's going on in that.
Only you, though, you know, what? Like, I don't know.
I saw confusion on her face.
I think, you know, there's this saying, right? You got to laugh to keep from crying. That's not only Sabrina, but it's also like borderline. You got to laugh to keep from getting arrested. Because some of the stuff you do is just, it's a little crazy.
Why? I don't have to go to the house. They changed the locks. They put a lock box on it for me. You want me to cash out you $50?
Cash out.
Yes, you want me to send you? Hey, whatever works. Whatever works.
What are you, a millennial? Still a cash app? Oh my gosh.
Well, right. I do have 2 kids that are millennials, so yes. So anywho.
Whatever works. She gets it done, apparently. Apparently she gets it done. But you know, that's sort of speaking to not being one-sided. Right?
Yeah,
she does have flipping experience.
I think if we just listen to this whole discussion here and we and let's say that we're talking to a fix and flipper, what you get out of it is that you're still dealing with REOs, you're still dealing with fix and flips, but what you're doing is you're adding more experience to that experience. The skill set that allows you to open the doors to different exit strategies that'll make you more money at the end of the day.
And like you brought up a good point. It's you're definitely mitigating your risk, and when it comes to the time value of money, you know, it's either with fix and flip, you have a lot more risk because your money is going to be tied up for a period of time, as well as you have a liability risk because you know you own the asset itself at that time. So with a note, you don't have that much liability, so you mitigate risk right there as well. So, but you know, with a fix and flip, you have one strategy. That's it, fix and flip. With a note, you have multiple strategies.
Yeah.
So, and the key thing is to understand, you got to be patient. You're patient, then there's a lot of value in all those strategies.
A ton of value. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that, you know, all notes out there, there's always some strategy you can use to make money off of them. The only time you're not going to make money is when the seller is just being unreasonable and won't sell you at a reasonable rate, which we're finding right now, unfortunately, in the industry because the inventory is kind of dried up a little. But, you know, you just have to stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we talked about.
Yep.
We
had a whole episode about that.
Yeah, that's a totally different topic. We're probably going to have to circle back to it because there's some people who didn't like what we had to say.
Oh, is that right?
Really?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sell seats, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, those seats. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Well,
got to put butts in the seats. So
sometimes the truth hurts.
hey, isn't that our what's our slogan again for LOI events? The
Uh,
unspoken truth.
the unspoken truth. There you go.
So we're
Yeah.
talking about
Unspoken truth that people don't want to hear us tell.
it. The unspoken truth with the subtitle, "The Godmother of Notes will have you in a headlock if you do anything crazy."
See those things about me. You guys are making me be like some mean lady, and I'm not. My
I'm just
bark
telling
way
you, you got some
way worse than my bite.
there's some mafia ancestry going on in there, so I don't know what's going on. All right, so I want to actually wrap this up a little bit different. The Rival Brothers, you guys had like a meetup recently, and then Sabrina and I are doing a meetup in Atlanta next week. So you want to talk a little bit about that, and then me and Sabrina can talk about what we're doing, because that's important. People have been asking about how can we interact with you guys, how can we get a hold of you guys, and we're around. So you guys want to talk
Right.
about that?
Sure. We held our first meetup. I think it was last Friday,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole idea was to bring something different to the table that no one else brings, and that is how do you bring people that are like-minded in the industry, and it doesn't have to be in the note industry. It could be fix and flips or REOs together to where we actually talk about assets. We trade assets. We talk about exit strategies. We talk about anything related to issues that they're having with their investments. And the idea is that we all collaborate and share together. So it's not the Revival Brothers show. It's everybody contributing equally. So if somebody had some assets to bring to the table, they give it to us, and we make sure that they'd be able to get up and talk about it, and everybody else can contribute. We would analyze it. And that's the big thing is not just show the asset, but also analyze the asset in the meeting. If we can do that, if we can do that successfully and pull it off, which I think we did in the last meeting, according to everybody that showed up, what that does is it gives a trusted resource and an avenue for people to purchase assets.
Why don't we show an example of what we're talking about that's different than what's out there, Joe? Do you have that up on your screen?
Can you show your screen, Joe?
Yeah, I think I can share my screen here.
Just for not long, a couple minutes. Let's see
Okay,
what you
here we
got.
go. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just back up. So these, like for instance, we talked about performing notes, and then we would go through the performing note. This is an example of what it would look like broken down after we've analyzed it. So we give a suggested offer price at a certain percentage of UPB, and it also outlines your IRR and your cash on cash. It gives you basic information, some surface level due diligence on demographics, and then some of the note details with the UPB, interest rates, and so forth. And then we go from there into more of a full analytics sheet where we say, okay, that was a performing note, but what happens to that performing note if the borrower doesn't pay? And what happens if it goes into foreclosure? If you take it back, what does that look like as if you wholesale it, rent it, or fix and flip it? So we kind of go through all the different scenarios. And then we also, in between, there's exit strategies in between, because let's say we took it back and rather than wholesaling it, maybe we wanted to do some seller financing on it. That's a whole nother exit strategy. It's not even listed here. So we get into those kinds of discussions, and I think that it elevates the core information to a level that isn't surface level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of these things that we go to is just motivational. Hey,
Yes.
this is a great industry to be in. Notes, blah blah blah. You can make this, that, the other thing. But we're not into the whole motivational speaking thing. We're into the nuts and bolts, and
Real
just
deal.
kind of dive into it.
Yeah,
And
the
that's
transparency of what a note is and the numbers behind it. So
Right.
know what you're buying.
and that's what people were responding to. So
So
that's it in a nutshell. And then the next event will be, I believe, on September 28th.
Is it 28th?
Or is it 20?
Yeah, it's the no, it's 26th,
26.
Thursday.
Okay. It'll be
Yeah.
on September 26th. Yes, sorry. And if anybody is interested, they can go to meetup.com and look for Revival Brothers, and we should pop up somewhere. And if not, just email us.
All right.
And then also, I should point out that LOI is having a webinar. We're going to be doing a webinar coming up here. Let me just bring up that schedule. So the next LOI online live webinar is scheduled for September 24th. And that one will be a paid webinar, and it's going to include some kind of more of a deep dive into processes and learning about nodes.
We're gonna take the handcuffs off Sabrina, so she's gonna be able to kind of be herself a little bit.
Yeah.
But it'll be a deep dive discussion about things that we really think people need to know about, kind of nuts and bolts. So it's more like a workshop than a webinar, really. But it's just online. So I'm looking forward to it.
We'll have another one October 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And then in November, we'll have one on November 19th. And then this is all followed by our big event in January 25th through the 26th in Orange County. We're going to have a big workshop.
Yeah.
So you're not going to want to miss that one. It's going to be full of information.
Oh, they get to meet us.
To meet us, you get to meet some other people in the industry. There's going to be it's going to be really good. So anyway, that's all. I think that covers all of the LOI stuff and Revival Brothers stuff. And then there's your meetup that's coming up.
Yeah, I'm just doing I'm doing a millennial thing. We do pop-ups. We just pop up somewhere.
Okay.
So I'm doing a
I'm
pop-up.
a millennial.
Yeah,
I'm not.
but it's my thing. You're coming.
Oh, I'm coming. Oh. It's not a co-host thing. Oh, she just crushed my pride.
Oh. Anyway, we're doing a pop-up in Atlanta, so it's almost like a miniature one-day mastermind. Really exclusive. We've got I think 5 seats left, Sabrina. I'll have to double check my head count.
I'm just attending. I'm not in charge.
Oh, now she's gonna be salty. You see this? I gotta go get some roses or something. What do you pay godmothers? I don't know. I don't know. She's gonna have my feet in cement blocks if I don't make this up. So anyway, yeah.
I'll have to separate you two already.
You'll have this whole dynamic back and forth in Atlanta next week, September 13th. We are going to have a WeWork space in Buckhead, and which I think Buckhead, I've never been to Atlanta like that, so I think it's more near downtown. But if you're in Atlanta area, or you're willing to drive down, there's a couple people coming from Tennessee coming to the event, so it should be really good. We're going to let our hair down and really kind of dive deep into some things. You can bring your deals, you can bring your questions, obviously, and then I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that I'll be debuting as well. So if you're in the Atlanta area, September 13th, if you want to come out and hang out, please let me know. Send to info@loievents.com, right? That's our email address, right?
Yep.
Or you can just make a comment wherever we're going to post this video, and we will reach out to you and put you on the list.
Yep.
And hopefully I'm not swimming with the fishes. All right. So I'm Zarina Harris. This is LOI Events. I want to say thank you for coming, and we'll catch up with some other webinar to come.
That's
Until
a wrap.
next time.
All right. That's a wrap. Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.